The gunshot that killed Adelaide Ramsey's husband echoed through the canyon for 3 seconds before silence swallowed the world whole. And in that terrible quiet, she realized she was now worth more money than any woman in the Arizona Territory had a right to be. It was 1882, and the high desert town of Snowflake sat like a collection of wooden bones beneath an unforgiving sun. Adelaide stood at her husband's graveside 6 days after the shooting, her black dress gathering dust in the hot wind that swept down from the White Mountains. She was 24 years old, and the weight of 10,000 acres, 2,000 head of cattle, mining interests in 3 counties, and a ranch house that rivaled anything in Tucson or Phoenix now rested on her narrow shoulders. Charles Ramsey had been 51 when a claim jumper's bullet found his heart up near the Silver Prospects. He had been a hard man, a driven man, but he had never raised his hand to Adelaide, and for that she had been grateful. Love had not been part of their arrangement. Her father had owed Charles money, and Adelaide had been the payment rendered. She had been 18, fresh from a convent school in St. Louis, and she had learned quickly how to run a household, manage accounts, and keep her thoughts to herself. Now the good people of Snowflake stood around the grave in their Sunday clothes, their faces appropriately somber, but Adelaide could feel the calculation behind their eyes. The men were wondering who would control the Ramsey empire now. The women were wondering how long before Adelaide remarried, and to whom. Agnes Fletcher, the banker's wife, had already made pointed comments about how a woman alone was like a ship without a rudder. Harold Grayson, who owned the second-largest ranch in the territory, had expressed his sympathies with a hand that lingered too long on Adelaide's elbow. Even Reverend Morris had suggested, gently, that a woman of her station might find comfort in a hasty union with a steadier, more experienced hand to guide her affairs. Adelaide had smiled and thanked them all and felt absolutely nothing. The funeral ended. People returned to their lives. Adelaide returned to the vast ranch house that had never felt like home, and she sat in Charles's office, surrounded by ledgers and maps and the smell of old leather and tobacco. She opened the books and began to read. She read for days. She learned things about her late husband's business that surprised her. She learned about water rights that stretched across 3 territories. She learned about investments in the railroad that would make anyone who held the right parcels wealthier than cattle ever could. She learned about loans Charles had made to half the businessmen in Snowflake, loans that gave him leverage, power, control. She learned that she was now one of the most powerful people in northern Arizona, and absolutely no one thought she could handle it. The first test came 2 weeks after the burial. Adelaide rode into Snowflake in the ranch wagon, driven by old Miguel, who had worked for Charles since the beginning. She wore a practical riding skirt and a white shirtwaist, her dark hair pinned up sensibly beneath a wide-brimmed hat. She walked into the first bank of Snowflake with her head high and asked to speak with Edmund Fletcher about her accounts. Edmund made her wait 30 minutes. When he finally received her, he sat behind his massive desk like a king on a throne, his belly straining against his vest, his smile patronizing. "Mrs. Ramsey, what a pleasure. Now, I have been giving considerable thought to your situation, and I believe the wisest course would be to establish a trust. I would be happy to manage your affairs, for a reasonable fee, of course. A woman in your position needs protection from the vultures who would take advantage." Adelaide had set her reticule on the desk with a small, precise movement. "Mr. Fletcher, I am here to inform you that I will be managing my own affairs. I have reviewed all of Charles's holdings, and I understand them quite well. I will need regular reports on the accounts, and I expect them to be detailed and accurate. Is that clear?" Edmund's smile had frozen. "Mrs. Ramsey, I am not sure you understand the complexities involved. Banking, investments, these are matters that require a certain expertise, a certain masculine comprehension of finance and risk." "I comprehend perfectly well," Adelaide had said, her voice pleasant as honey and just as smooth. "I also comprehend that Charles held your note for the expansion you made on your home last year. $10,000 at 6% interest. The payment is due at the end of this month. Will you be able to make that payment, Mr. Fletcher?" The color had drained from Edmund's face. That is hardly relevant to this discussion." "It is entirely relevant. You see, I am beginning to understand that power in this town is not about gender, Mr. Fletcher. It is about who holds the notes, and I hold quite a few of them. So when I ask for detailed reports on my accounts, I trust you will provide them." Promptly. She had walked out with her head high, feeling the first stirrings of something she had not felt in 6 years. Freedom. But freedom came with a price. Within a month, Adelaide found herself increasingly isolated. The women of Snowflake whispered that she was putting on airs, that she thought herself better than her station. The men simply refused to do business with her. When she tried to hire additional hands for the ranch, no one would take the job. When she attended the town council meeting to discuss the water rights issue, she was told politely but firmly that the meeting was for landowners and businessmen, and perhaps she would be more comfortable waiting outside. She had not waited outside. She had stood up in the back of that room and said, in a voice that carried to every corner, "I own more land than any 3 of you combined. I employ more people than anyone in this county. I have more invested in the future of this territory than most of you ever will. And I am a landowner and a businesswoman, so I will stay." Harold Grayson had laughed, actually laughed. "Mrs. Ramsey, you are making a spectacle of yourself. You have no idea how to run a ranch. You have no idea how to negotiate water rights or manage stock or deal with rustlers. You are a woman playing at a man's game, and sooner or later you will fail. Then perhaps you will be ready to accept help from those who actually know what they are doing." Adelaide had wanted to scream at him. She had wanted to list every single thing she had learned in the past month, every decision she had made, every problem she had solved. But she knew it would not matter. In their eyes, she would always be inadequate simply because she was a woman. So she had left that meeting with her dignity intact and her heart burning with frustration. That night, lying alone in the big house, Adelaide had let herself cry for the first time since Charles died. Not for him, for herself, for the impossible position she found herself in. She was wealthy beyond measure, but she could not use that wealth to command respect. She was capable, but no one would give her the chance to prove it. She was alone in a way that had nothing to do with being unmarried and everything to do with being utterly unseen. 3 days later, everything changed. Adelaide had decided to ride out to the northern pastures to check on the cattle herself. Miguel had protested, saying it was not safe for her to ride alone, but she had insisted. She needed to see the land, to understand what she owned, to feel like she was actually doing something. She took her mare, a steady bay named Constance, and she rode out in the cool of the early morning. The land stretched out before her in shades of gold and red and deep brown. Juniper and pinon dotted the high desert, and in the distance, the white mountains rose like a promise of cooler air. Adelaide breathed in the scent of sage and dust and felt something loosen in her chest. Out here, away from the town and the judging eyes, she could almost believe she belonged. She was checking the fence line near Silver Creek when she saw the cattle, about 20 head, grazing peacefully. They looked healthy, which was good. Charles had always been meticulous about the stock. She was about to turn Constance back toward the ranch when she noticed the riders. There were 4 of them, moving slowly through the herd, cutting out several head with the ease of experienced cowboys. But something about the way they moved, furtive and quick, made Adelaide's stomach tighten. These were not her men. She knew every hand who worked the Ramsey ranch, and these men were strangers, rustlers. Adelaide's first instinct was to ride back to the ranch and get help. But by the time she returned with men, the rustlers would be long gone, and she would have lost valuable stock. Her second instinct was to confront them herself, but she was one woman with no weapon against 4 men who were certainly armed. Her third instinct, the one that won out, was foolish and brave and desperate all at once. She rode Constance down the slope toward the men, not fast enough to spook them but fast enough to make her presence known. "Good morning," she called out, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "Can I help you with something?" The 4 men turned as one. They were rough-looking, with the weathered faces of men who spent their lives outdoors. The one in front, a barrel-chested man with a scar running down his cheek, grinned at her. "Well now, what do we have here?" "You lost, sweetheart." "Not at all. I am Adelaide Ramsey, and these are my cattle. I would appreciate it if you would leave them where they are and move along." The men exchanged glances, and then they laughed. The sound made Adelaide's skin crawl. "Your cattle," the scarred man said. "I do not think so. These here are free-range stock, and we are just doing a little gathering." "You should head on home, little lady, before you get hurt." Adelaide's hands tightened on the reins. "These cattle bear the Ramsey brand. They are not free-range, and I am not leaving until you do." The scarred man's grin faded. "You are starting to annoy me. I suggest you turn that horse around right now." Adelaide opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a new voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I suggest you listen to the lady." Everyone turned. A man on a gray horse had appeared on the ridge above them, silhouetted against the morning sun. He was tall in the saddle, wearing a dusty brown hat and a long coat despite the heat. Even from a distance, Adelaide could see the rifle resting across his saddle, casual but ready. The scarred man's expression darkened. "This is not your concern, stranger. Ride on." The stranger urged his horse down the slope, moving with an easy confidence that suggested he was comfortable in dangerous situations. As he got closer, Adelaide could see his face. He was young, maybe 26 or 27, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days of stubble. His eyes were a clear, startling blue, and they were fixed on the rustlers with unwavering intensity. "Actually, it is my concern. I was just hired on at the Ramsey Ranch, and part of my job is making sure the stock does not walk off with the wrong people. So I reckon you should move along like the lady said." Adelaide blinked. She had not hired anyone, but she was not about to contradict him now. The scarred man looked from the stranger to Adelaide and back again. He was clearly calculating his odds. 4 against 2, but one of the 2 was a woman, and the other was armed and looked like he knew how to use that rifle. After a long, tense moment, the scarred man spat into the dust. "This is not over," he said. Then he wheeled his horse around, and the other 3 followed. They rode off at a gallop, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Adelaide let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. She looked up at the stranger who was watching the rustlers disappear into the distance. "Thank you," she said, "but I should tell you I did not hire you. I do not even know who you are." The stranger turned those blue eyes on her, and for the first time he smiled. It was a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger, almost boyish. "Name is Wyatt Emerson, madam, and I know you did not hire me, but I was hoping you might after I just saved your cattle and possibly your life." Adelaide could not help it. She laughed. It was a startled, slightly hysterical sound, but it was genuine. "That is rather presumptuous of you, Mr. Emerson. Call me Wyatt. And yes, it is presumptuous. But I have been looking for work, and I heard you were having trouble finding hands. Seems like nobody in Snowflake wants to work for a woman, no matter how good the pay. I am not from Snowflake. I do not care who I work for, as long as the pay is fair and the work is honest." Adelaide studied him. He sat his horse like a man who had spent his whole life in the saddle. His hands were calloused and capable. His eyes were direct, with no hint of the condescension she had grown so tired of. "Where are you from?" she asked. "Texas, originally. Been drifting for a while. Worked ranches from the Rio Grande to Montana. I am good with cattle, good with horses, and I can handle trouble when it comes. Which, if you do not mind me saying, seems like something you might need." He was right. Adelaide needed men she could trust, men who would work for her without treating her like a fool. And Wyatt Emerson had just proven that he was capable at the very least. "The pay is $30 a month plus room and board," she said. "The work is hard, the hours are long, and I expect loyalty and honesty. Can you provide those?" "Yes, madam, I can." "Then you are hired. Report to the ranch house this afternoon, and I will have Miguel show you the bunkhouse and introduce you to the other hands." She paused. "And Mr. Emerson, Wyatt, thank you, truly." He touched the brim of his hat. "No thanks necessary, Mrs. Ramsey. I am just glad I was in the right place at the right time." As Adelaide rode back to the ranch, she found herself thinking about Wyatt Emerson's smile and the way he had called her madam without a trace of mockery. It was a small thing, but in a world where she was constantly fighting for respect, small things mattered. Wyatt showed up at the ranch that afternoon with all his worldly possessions in a saddle bag. Miguel, who had been with the Ramsey operation for 20 years, looked him over with a critical eye and then nodded, satisfied. "You look like you know your way around a ranch," the old man said in his accented English. "We need good men here. The senora, she is a fine woman, but the others in town, they make it hard for her. You treat her with respect, yes?" "Yes, sir," Wyatt said. "I intend to." Miguel showed him the bunkhouse, a long, low building that housed the dozen men who worked the ranch. They were a mixed group, mostly Mexican and a few whites, all of them older and set in their ways. They looked at Wyatt with suspicion, the way ranch hands always look at a new hire. But Wyatt had been the new hire many times before. He knew how to handle it. He kept his head down, did his work, and did not complain. The first week was a test. The other hands watched to see if Wyatt would pull his weight. He did. He rode the fence lines, repaired gates, helped with the branding, and worked from sunup to sundown without a word of complaint. He was quiet, competent, and respectful. By the end of the week, even the most skeptical of the hands had accepted him, but it was not the hands Wyatt was thinking about. It was Adelaide. He saw her every day, riding out to check on the work, reviewing the accounts in the ranch office, making decisions with a confidence that impressed him. She was nothing like he had expected. When he had heard about the wealthy widow in Snowflake, he had imagined a pampered society woman, someone who would fold under the pressures of running a ranch. But Adelaide Ramsey was made of sterner stuff. She was smart, determined, and utterly unafraid to get her hands dirty. He saw her helping with a difficult calving one morning, her sleeves rolled up, her face intent as she worked alongside Miguel. He saw her negotiating with a feed supplier, her voice calm and firm as she refused to be overcharged. He saw her sitting on the porch of the big house in the evenings, going over paperwork by lamplight, her brow furrowed with concentration, and he found himself drawn to her in a way that was both unexpected and undeniable. It was not just that she was beautiful, though she was. She had dark hair that she usually wore pinned up, but he had seen it down once, flowing over her shoulders like a silken curtain. She had brown eyes that could be warm or fierce depending on her mood. She had a figure that even her practical clothing could not hide, but it was more than her looks. It was the way she carried herself, with a dignity that no amount of small-town gossip could diminish. It was the way she treated her workers with respect, paying fair wages and listening to their concerns. It was the way she refused to be bullied or belittled, no matter how many men tried. Wyatt had worked for a lot of people in his 26 years, and Adelaide Ramsey was the first one he genuinely admired. The problem was, he was a cowboy, and she was one of the wealthiest women in the territory. The gulf between them was vast, and he knew it. So he kept his distance, did his job, and tried not to think about the way her eyes lit up when she smiled or the sound of her laugh, rare and precious. Then came the night of the town social. It was held once a month in Snowflake, a chance for the community to gather, dance, and gossip. Adelaide usually avoided these events, but this time she had decided to attend. She told herself it was because she needed to maintain a presence in the community, to show that she was not hiding or ashamed. But part of her, a small, stubborn part, wanted to prove that she could hold her head high no matter what they thought of her. She wore a dress of deep green silk, one of the few reminders of her old life in St. Louis. It had a high collar and long sleeves, perfectly proper, but it fit her in a way that made her feel feminine and powerful all at once. She arrived at the town hall alone, driving herself in the small buggy, and she walked in with her chin up and her heart pounding. The hall fell silent when she entered. Every eye turned to her. The women in their calico and cotton, the men in their Sunday suits, all of them staring. Adelaide forced herself to smile and nod, as if she did not notice the whispers starting up like a brush fire. Agnes Fletcher was the first to approach, her expression a perfect mask of false sympathy. "Adelaide, dear, how brave of you to come. I know it must be difficult being alone like this. If you ever need someone to talk to, someone to guide you through these trying times, you know where to find me." "Thank you, Agnes, but I am managing quite well," Adelaide said, her voice pleasant. Agnes's smile tightened. "Of course, dear. Though I must say there has been talk. People are concerned about you, living out there on that ranch with all those men. It is not proper for a woman in your position. You really should consider remarrying. Harold Grayson was just saying the other day how much he admires your fortitude." Harold Grayson was 53 years old, twice widowed, and had a reputation for drinking and cruelty. The thought of marrying him made Adelaide's stomach turn. "I appreciate Mr. Grayson's admiration," she said carefully, "but I am not looking to remarry at this time." "Not looking to remarry." This came from Constance Perry, another of the town's leading ladies. "But Adelaide, a woman alone is vulnerable. Surely you see that. And the way you have been conducting yourself, managing the ranch, making business decisions, it is unseemly. People are starting to talk." "Let them talk," Adelaide said, her patience fraying. "I have done nothing wrong. I am managing my late husband's estate as he would have wanted." "That is hardly scandalous." "But it is not natural," Agnes insisted. "Women are not meant to run businesses, Adelaide. We are meant to be the moral center of the home, to guide and nurture. You are trying to be something you are not, and it is embarrassing to watch." The words hit Adelaide like a slap. Embarrassing. They thought she was an embarrassment. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a commotion at the door drew everyone's attention. A group of cowboys had entered, dusty from the trail, clearly just off work. They were laughing and jostling each other, bringing a rough energy into the refined space. Adelaide recognized some of them as hands from the Grayson Ranch, and in the middle of them, looking distinctly uncomfortable, was Wyatt Emerson. He had cleaned up for the occasion, wearing a freshly washed shirt and a string tie, his hair still damp from washing. He looked out of place among the finely dressed townspeople, but there was something undeniably appealing about him, a kind of rugged honesty that made the other men in the room look soft by comparison. Harold Grayson spotted the cowboys and frowned. "This is a town social, not a saloon. If you boys want to drink and carouse, you can do it elsewhere." One of the Grayson hands, a loudmouth named Pete, grinned. "We are just here for the dancing, Mr. Grayson. No harm in that, is there?" Harold's frown deepened, but he could not very well throw out his own employees without causing a scene. He waved them off dismissively. "Fine, but behave yourselves." The music started up again, a lively reel played by a fiddle and a banjo. Couples moved onto the dance floor. Adelaide stood at the edge of the room, feeling increasingly isolated. No one asked her to dance. The men avoided her eyes and the women continued their whispering. Then Wyatt was standing in front of her, his hat in his hands, his blue eyes serious. "Mrs. Ramsey, would you do me the honor of a dance?" Adelaide's heart jumped. She was aware of every eye in the room on them, aware of the whispers intensifying. She should say no. Dancing with one of her ranch hands would only add fuel to the gossip, but she was so tired of caring what they thought. And Wyatt was looking at her with such straightforward kindness that she could not bring herself to refuse. "Yes," she said, "I would be happy to." They moved onto the dance floor and Wyatt took her hand. His grip was firm and warm, his other hand resting lightly on her waist. He was a good dancer, surprisingly so for a cowboy, moving her through the steps with confidence. Adelaide found herself relaxing, enjoying the music and the movement and the feeling of being treated like a woman instead of a problem to be solved. "You did not have to do this," she said quietly as they turned. "I know," Wyatt said. "I wanted to. People are talking. People are always talking. I have learned not to pay much attention." Adelaide smiled despite herself. "You are braver than I am, then." "I do not think so." "I think you are the bravest person I have ever met, Mrs. Ramsey. You are doing something most men could not do, and you are doing it alone with everyone against you. That takes courage." The words, so simply and sincerely spoken, made Adelaide's eyes sting. She blinked rapidly, willing away the tears. "Thank you," she whispered. The dance ended and Wyatt escorted her off the floor. He was about to step away when Harold Grayson's voice rang out across the room. "Well, well, Mrs. Ramsey, I see you have found yourself a dance partner among your employees. How quaint." The room went silent. Adelaide felt her face flush. Harold was smiling, but there was cruelty in it. He had clearly been drinking and he was in the mood to cause trouble. "There is nothing quaint about it," Adelaide said evenly. "Mr. Emerson was kind enough to ask me to dance. I accepted. That is all." "Oh, I am sure that is all," Harold said, his tone dripping with insinuation. "But you have to understand how it looks, Adelaide. A wealthy widow, dancing with a hired hand. People might get the wrong idea. They might think you are not the respectable woman you claim to be." Adelaide's temper flared. "And what idea would that be, Mr. Grayson? That I am a woman who treats her employees with respect? That I do not consider myself too good to dance with an honest working man? That you are a woman who does not know her place?" Harold shot back. "You have been parading around this town like you are one of us, like you have earned the right to sit at the table with men who have built their lives from nothing. But you have not earned anything, Adelaide. Your husband left you a fortune, and you are running it into the ground because you are too proud to accept help. You are not good enough to run that ranch. You never were, and sooner or later everyone will see it." The words hung in the air, ugly and damning. Adelaide felt the blood drain from her face. She had faced whispers and snubs, but this was different. This was a public humiliation, a direct attack on her character and abilities. She looked around the room searching for support, but most people were looking away, embarrassed or secretly pleased by her comeuppance. Then Wyatt stepped forward. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "You are wrong, Mr. Grayson." Harold turned to him, his eyebrows raised. "Excuse me, you are wrong," Wyatt repeated. "Mrs. Ramsey is not just good enough, she is better than all of you." A murmur ran through the crowd. Harold's face darkened. "You are a hired hand. You do not get to speak to me that way." "I am a man who knows quality when he sees it," Wyatt said. "I have worked ranches all over the West, for men who thought they were God's gift to the cattle business. Most of them could not organize a church social, let alone run an operation the size of the Ramsey Ranch. But Mrs. Ramsey, she knows every detail of that ranch. She knows the water rights, the stock, the land. She negotiates fair deals, treats her workers with respect, and makes decisions that would make most men sweat. And she does it all while people like you try to tear her down." He took a step closer to Harold, his blue eyes blazing. "You say she is not good enough. She is doing the job of 5 men, and she is doing it better than you ever could. You say she does not know her place. Her place is at the head of the biggest, most successful ranch in northern Arizona, and she earned that place by being smarter and tougher than anyone gave her credit for. So yes, Mr. Grayson, she is better than you. She is better than every man in this room who has spent the last few months trying to make her fail instead of helping her succeed." The room was dead silent. Harold's face had gone from red to purple. "How dare you?" he hissed. "I dare because it is the truth," Wyatt said simply. "And if you or anyone else has a problem with it, you can take it up with me." Harold looked like he wanted to throw a punch, but he was not stupid enough to start a brawl in the middle of a town social. Instead, he turned on his heel and stormed out, his cronies following. The room erupted in whispers, but Adelaide barely heard them. She was staring at Wyatt, her heart pounding, feeling something shift deep inside her. He had stood up for her. Not because he had to, not because there was anything in it for him, but because he believed what he had said. Because he saw her as she truly was, not as the town wanted her to be. "Wyatt," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "We should go." He nodded, and together they walked out of the town hall, leaving the whispers and stares behind. Outside, the night air was cool and filled with the scent of sage. Adelaide stood on the steps, breathing deeply, trying to steady herself. Wyatt stood beside her, his hands in his pockets, looking up at the stars. "I am sorry if I overstepped," he said after a moment. "I know that is going to make things harder for you." "You did not overstep," Adelaide said. "You said what I have been wanting to say for months. Thank you." He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight she could see the softness in his eyes. "I meant every word. You are remarkable, Adelaide. I hope you know that." The use of her first name, so simple and intimate, made her breath catch. "I do not feel remarkable. I feel like I am drowning most days." "You are not drowning. You are swimming against a current, and that is different. It is harder, but it means you are strong." Adelaide laughed, a small, broken sound. "I do not feel strong. I feel angry and frustrated and so tired of fighting." "Then maybe you do not have to fight alone anymore." She looked up at him, searching his face. "What are you saying?" Wyatt hesitated, and then he took a step closer. "I am saying that I am here, and I am not going anywhere. I am saying that you do not have to carry this burden by yourself. I am saying that I think you are the most incredible woman I have ever met, and if you will let me, I would like to help you. Not because I think you need saving, but because I believe in what you are doing." Adelaide's heart was racing. She knew what he was offering, and it was more than just his labor as a ranch hand. It was partnership, support, maybe even something deeper. and she wanted it desperately. But she also knew the cost. If people think there is something between us, it will destroy my reputation. They already think I am improper. If they believe I am having a relationship with one of my employees, they will crucify me. Let them, Wyatt said fiercely. Your reputation in this town is already hanging by a thread because of their prejudice, not because of anything you have done wrong. You could be a saint, and they would still find fault with you. So why not live your life the way you want? Why not let yourself have someone in your corner who actually sees you? Adelaide felt tears spill over, sliding down her cheeks. I am so tired of being alone, she whispered. Wyatt reached up and gently wiped the tears away with his thumb. You are not alone anymore, he said softly. Not if you do not want to be. And then, standing there under the stars, Adelaide made a choice. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was a soft, tentative kiss, born of loneliness and hope and the desperate need to feel something other than anger and frustration. Wyatt froze for a moment and then he kissed her back, his arms coming around her, holding her close. It was warm and real and everything she had not known she needed. When they finally pulled apart, Adelaide was breathless. What do we do now? She asked. Wyatt smiled, that slow, genuine smile that made her heart flutter. We go back to the ranch. We keep working. We build something together. And we do not let anyone tell us it is wrong. They rode back to the ranch in the buggy, side by side in the moonlight, and Adelaide felt lighter than she had in months. For the first time since Charles died, she did not feel like she was facing the world alone. But the world, as it turned out, was not done with her yet. The next morning, Adelaide woke to find a letter that had been slipped under the door of the ranch house. It was unsigned, written in a spidery, angry hand. It accused her of immoral behavior, of bringing shame to Snowflake, of corrupting the hired help. It suggested that she leave town before she was forced out. It was hateful and cruel, and it made Adelaide's hands shake as she read it. Wyatt found her in the kitchen, staring at the letter. He read it over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. Cowards, he said. They do not even have the courage to sign their names. It does not matter, Adelaide said dully. They mean it. They want me gone. Then we make sure you stay, Wyatt said. He pulled up a chair and sat down across from her. Adelaide, listen to me. You have built something here. You have a successful ranch, loyal workers, and the respect of the people who matter. A few bitter, small-minded townspeople do not get to take that away from you. We fight back. We show them that you are not going anywhere. How? Adelaide asked, feeling helpless. By doing exactly what you have been doing, by being better than them, by refusing to let their hate win. He reached across the table and took her hand. And by not hiding what is between us. If they are going to accuse us of something, let it be the truth. I care about you, Adelaide. I think I have since the day I met you, and I am not ashamed of it. Adelaide looked at their joined hands, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. I care about you too, she admitted. More than I should, probably. More than is sensible. Then let us be sensible together, Wyatt said with a smile. Let us show this town that we do not need their approval to be happy. Over the next few weeks, Adelaide and Wyatt did just that. They worked side by side on the ranch, making improvements, expanding the herd, and securing the future of the operation. They attended church together, sat side by side in the pew, and ignored the stares and whispers. They rode into town together to buy supplies, and Wyatt stood by Adelaide's side as she conducted business. A quiet, reassuring presence. The gossip intensified. People called Adelaide shameless. They said she was no better than a common woman who sold her virtue. They said Wyatt was taking advantage of her grief and her vulnerability. But Adelaide and Wyatt did not respond to the gossip. They simply lived their lives with integrity and honesty, and slowly, something began to shift. It started with Miguel. The old foreman, who had been skeptical of Wyatt at first, began to speak up in town about how much the ranch had improved since Wyatt arrived. He talked about the new irrigation system they had installed, the fences they had repaired, the increased productivity of the herd. He made it clear that Wyatt was not some opportunist but a skilled worker who was helping Adelaide succeed. Then the other ranch hands started talking. They spoke about how Adelaide treated them fairly, how she paid on time and listened to their concerns. They spoke about how Wyatt worked harder than any man they had ever seen, how he was up before dawn and did not stop until the work was done. They made it clear that the Ramsey ranch was thriving, not failing, and that Adelaide and Wyatt were the reason why. Slowly, the narrative began to change. Not everyone came around, of course. Harold Grayson and his circle continued to sneer and criticize. Agnes Fletcher and her friends continued to whisper. But there were others, quieter voices, who began to see Adelaide and Wyatt for what they truly were. Two people working together to build something good. One afternoon, a young couple came to the ranch house. They were homesteaders, trying to establish a small farm on the outskirts of Snowflake, and they were struggling. They had heard that Adelaide was fair and generous, and they wanted to ask if she could loan them enough to buy seed for the spring planting. They had no collateral, no way to guarantee repayment, and they were clearly terrified that she would turn them away. Adelaide listened to their story, looked at the desperation in their eyes, and thought about all the times she had been dismissed and underestimated. "I will give you the loan," she said. $500, interest-free for the first year. If your crops come in, you pay me back. If they do not, we will work something out. I believe in giving people a chance to prove themselves." The couple nearly cried with gratitude. Word of Adelaide's generosity spread, and soon other small farmers and struggling ranchers were coming to her for help. She gave what she could, always with fair terms, always with respect. She became known not as the widow who did not know her place, but as the woman who gave people a chance when no one else would. And through it all, Wyatt was by her side. He became more than just a hired hand. He became her partner in every sense of the word, helping her make decisions, offering his perspective, and supporting her when the weight of it all became too much. They spent long evenings on the porch of the ranch house, talking about their dreams and their fears, learning each other in the way people do when they are building something real. One night, as they sat watching the sun set over the distant mountains, Wyatt turned to Adelaide and said, "I love you." The words were simple, but they hit Adelaide like a thunderbolt. She looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, and felt her heart swell. "I love you too," she said, and it was the truest thing she had ever spoken. Wyatt reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a ring, simple and unadorned, just a band of silver. "I know I am not what anyone would expect for you," he said. "I am just a cowboy with nothing to my name but a horse and a saddle. But I love you, Adelaide, and I want to spend my life with you. I want to build this ranch with you, raise a family with you, grow old with you. Will you marry me?" Adelaide's hands were shaking as she took the ring. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married a month later in the small church in Snowflake. It was not a grand affair. Adelaide wore a simple dress of ivory lace and Wyatt wore his best suit. Miguel stood up for Wyatt and a few of the ranch hands attended. So did some of the families Adelaide had helped, the homesteaders and small farmers who had come to see her as a friend. Harold Grayson and his circle did not attend, of course. Neither did Agnes Fletcher and the other leading ladies of the town. But Adelaide did not care. She stood at the altar and said her vows to Wyatt, promising to love and honor him, and she meant every word. And when Reverend Morris pronounced them man and wife, and Wyatt kissed her, Adelaide felt a happiness so pure and complete that it brought tears to her eyes. After the wedding, they returned to the ranch, and life settled into a new rhythm. Wyatt officially became co-owner of the ranch, though Adelaide insisted that her name remain on all the legal documents. She had fought too hard for her independence to give it up, even to the man she loved. Wyatt understood and respected that. He had never wanted to take over or control her. He had only wanted to stand beside her, and that was what he did. They worked together to expand the ranch, buying up adjacent parcels of land when they became available, investing in new breeding stock, and improving their water rights. They hired more hands, paying fair wages and treating everyone with respect. The Ramsey Ranch became one of the most productive and respected operations in the territory, but it was not just the ranch that thrived. Adelaide and Wyatt's marriage was built on a foundation of mutual respect, trust, and deep love. They talked about everything, from the mundane details of ranch management to their hopes for the future. They laughed together, worked together, and supported each other through the inevitable challenges that came their way. A year after their marriage, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a mix of joy and fear. She had never imagined herself as a mother, had never thought she would have children. But with Wyatt, everything felt possible. He was overjoyed, treating her like she was made of glass, constantly worrying about her health and comfort. Adelaide found his protectiveness both endearing and exasperating, and she told him so repeatedly. "I am not an invalid," she said one evening as he tried to stop her from lifting a feed sack. "I am pregnant, not dying." "I know," Wyatt said, looking sheepish. "I just worry. You and this baby are the most important things in my life. I could not stand it if something happened to you." Adelaide softened. She took his hand and placed it on her belly, where a small bump was just beginning to show. "We are going to be fine," she said. "I am strong, and this baby is going to be strong too. You will see." Their son was born on a cold January night in 1884. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Adelaide thought she might not survive. But with Wyatt holding her hand and Miguel's wife, Rosa, acting as midwife, she brought a healthy baby boy into the world. They named him William after Wyatt's father, and from the moment Adelaide held him in her arms, she knew that her life had changed in the most profound way possible. William was a beautiful baby, with Wyatt's blue eyes and Adelaide's dark hair. He was also strong-willed and stubborn, traits he clearly inherited from both his parents. Raising him was a challenge, but it was also the greatest joy Adelaide had ever known. Wyatt was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son, teaching him about the ranch, the land, and the values they held dear. As William grew, so did the ranch. By the time he was 5, the Ramsey Ranch was one of the largest in Arizona, with over 15,000 acres and 3,000 head of cattle. Adelaide and Wyatt had become respected figures in the territory, known for their fairness, their generosity, and their refusal to compromise their principles. But success did not mean that the challenges disappeared. There were still droughts to contend with, still rustlers and dishonest dealers, still the occasional person who tried to take advantage of them. And there were still people in Snowflake who had never forgiven Adelaide for defying convention and marrying a cowboy. Harold Grayson was one of them. He had never recovered from the humiliation of that night at the town social, and he nursed a deep grudge against Adelaide and Wyatt. Over the years, he had tried several times to undermine them, spreading rumors, trying to sabotage their business deals, even attempting to buy up their water rights through intermediaries. But each time, Adelaide and Wyatt had outmaneuvered him, their combined intelligence and determination proving too much for his petty schemes. The final confrontation came in 1889, when William was 5 years old. Harold, desperate and deeply in debt, tried to rustle a large number of cattle from the Ramsey ranch. He hired a group of men to drive the cattle across the border into New Mexico, where he planned to sell them and use the money to pay off his creditors. But Harold had underestimated Wyatt. The cowboy who had once drifted from ranch to ranch had become a skilled manager and strategist. He had anticipated that someone might try something like this, and he had set up a system of lookouts and patrols. When the rustlers struck, Wyatt and a group of ranch hands were ready. The confrontation happened at dawn, in a narrow canyon on the edge of the Ramsey property. Wyatt and his men blocked the rustlers' path, and Wyatt called out for them to surrender. Harold, who was leading the group himself, refused. There was a tense standoff, and for a moment it seemed like violence was inevitable. But then Adelaide arrived. She had ridden out as soon as she heard what was happening, leaving William with Rosa. She rode Constance right into the middle of the standoff, her face set with determination. "Harold," she said, her voice carrying across the canyon, "this ends now." Harold looked at her with a mixture of hate and desperation. "You have taken everything from me," he said. "You and your cowboy husband, you have ruined me." "We have done nothing to you," Adelaide said. "You ruined yourself with your greed and your cruelty. But I am giving you one chance, Harold. Surrender now, let the cattle go, and I will not press charges. You can leave Snowflake and start over somewhere else. But if you do not, if you insist on this path, I will see you in prison. The choice is yours." Harold stared at her for a long moment, and then the fight seemed to drain out of him. He was an old man now, worn down by years of bitterness and failure. He signaled to his men to let the cattle go, and then he rode away, leaving Snowflake and the territory behind. Adelaide never saw him again. In the aftermath, the people of Snowflake finally seemed to understand what Adelaide and Wyatt had been trying to show them all along. They were not a scandal or a disgrace. They were two people who loved each other, who had built something beautiful together, and who had proven that strength and integrity mattered more than convention or prejudice. The years that followed were peaceful and productive. Adelaide and Wyatt continued to run the ranch, expanding their operations and investing in the future of the territory. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Annabelle in 1891, and another son named Thomas in 1894. William grew into a strong, capable young man who shared his parents' love of the land. Annabelle was spirited and clever, always asking questions and challenging assumptions. Thomas was quiet and thoughtful, with a gift for working with horses. As the children grew, Adelaide found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this place. She thought about the frightened girl who had been married off to pay her father's debts. She thought about the lonely widow who had been told she was not good enough to run a ranch. She thought about the moment she had decided to stop caring what other people thought and start living on her own terms. And she thought about Wyatt, the cowboy who had seen her worth when no one else could, who had stood up for her when she needed it most, and who had loved her with a fierceness that had changed her life forever. On their 20th wedding anniversary, in 1903, Adelaide and Wyatt stood on the porch of the ranch house and looked out at the land they had built together. William was 21 now, running much of the day-to-day operations of the ranch. Annabelle was 12, already showing signs of her mother's intelligence and determination. Thomas was 9, happiest when he was out with the horses. "You ever regret it?" Adelaide asked quietly. "Marrying me, giving up your freedom to be tied down to this place?" Wyatt turned to her, his blue eyes still as clear and startling as they had been the day they met. He had gray in his hair now and lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to Adelaide, he was still the most handsome man she had ever known. "Not for a single moment," he said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Adelaide. You and our children, this life we have built, it is more than I ever dreamed of. I love you more now than I did the day I married you, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you too," she said. "More than I can ever say." They stood there together, watching the sun set over the mountains, and Adelaide felt a deep, abiding sense of contentment. Her life had not been easy. She had faced prejudice, loss, and countless challenges. But she had also found love, purpose, and a family that filled her heart to bursting. She had proven to herself and to the world that she was good enough. More than good enough. She was exactly who she was meant to be. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. William married a kind, intelligent woman named Sarah from Flagstaff, and they gave Adelaide and Wyatt their first grandchildren, a pair of twin boys who were as wild and energetic as William had been. Annabelle went to college in California, one of the first women from the territory to do so, and she returned with a degree in literature and a passion for teaching. She opened a school in Snowflake, providing education to children whose families could not afford to send them away. Thomas took over the horse breeding program on the ranch, developing a reputation for producing some of the finest working horses in the West. Adelaide and Wyatt watched their children thrive with pride and joy. They had built not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of integrity, compassion, and hard work. The Ramsey Ranch became a symbol of what could be achieved when people refused to be limited by others' expectations. As they grew older, Adelaide and Wyatt began to slow down, leaving more of the ranch operations to William and Thomas. They spent their days on the porch, watching the grandchildren play, tending the garden Adelaide had planted, and simply enjoying each other's company. They had been through so much together, and the bond between them had only grown stronger with time. One warm summer evening in 1915, when Adelaide was 57 and Wyatt was 59, they sat on the porch swing, holding hands and watching the stars come out. The ranch was quiet, the day's work done, the children and grandchildren settled in their own homes. It was just the two of them, the way it had been so many times before. "You remember the night of the town social?" Adelaide asked, her voice soft. "When you told Harold Grayson that I was better than all of them," Wyatt smiled. "I remember. I meant it then, and I mean it now." "You changed my life that night," Adelaide said. "You made me believe that I did not have to accept what they thought of me. You made me believe in myself." "You already believed in yourself," Wyatt said. "I just reminded you of it. You were always strong, Adelaide. I just had the privilege of standing beside you while you showed the world what you were made of." Adelaide leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I am so grateful I found you," she whispered. "I cannot imagine my life without you." "You will never have to," Wyatt said, kissing the top of her head. "I am yours, Adelaide, now and always." They sat there together as the night deepened, two people who had defied convention, overcome prejudice, and built a life filled with love. They had proven that worth was not measured by what others thought, but by the choices you made and the people you stood by. They had shown that love could conquer even the deepest divides, and that together, two people could achieve anything. As the years went on, Adelaide and Wyatt continued to live on the ranch they loved, surrounded by the family they had created. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, mourned losses, and rejoiced in new beginnings. They grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year, until it seemed as much a part of the land as the mountains and the sky. When Adelaide was 72 in 1930, she fell ill. The doctor said it was her heart, weakened by a lifetime of hard work and stress. She spent her final weeks in bed, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, with Wyatt never leaving her side. He held her hand and told her stories of their life together, reminding her of all the battles they had won, all the love they had shared. "I am not afraid," Adelaide said one afternoon, her voice barely a whisper. "I have lived a good life, a full life, and I have loved you every day of it." "I have loved you too," Wyatt said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "You are the best part of me, Adelaide. You always have been." Adelaide smiled, a peaceful, contented smile. "Take care of them," she said, gesturing weakly to the family gathered around. "Tell them I am proud of them. Tell them to be brave and kind and to never let anyone tell them they are not good enough." "I will," Wyatt promised. Adelaide closed her eyes, still holding Wyatt's hand, and she slipped away quietly, surrounded by love. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people from all over the territory, people whose lives she had touched with her generosity, her courage, and her unwavering belief in doing what was right. The Ramsey Ranch flew its flag at half-mast, and the town of Snowflake, which had once judged her so harshly, mourned the loss of one of its greatest citizens. Wyatt lived for another 5 years, spending his days tending the ranch and playing with his great-grandchildren. He spoke often of Adelaide, keeping her memory alive with stories and laughter. And when he finally joined her in 1935, he was buried beside her on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, 2 headstones side by side, marking the resting place of 2 people who had loved deeply and lived bravely. The Ramsey Ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the generations, a testament to the legacy Adelaide and Wyatt had created. And in Snowflake, Arizona, the story of the wealthy widow and the cowboy who believed in her became the stuff of legend, a reminder that true love, courage, and integrity could overcome even the greatest obstacles, because Adelaide Ramsey had not been good enough in the eyes of the world. She had been better, and Wyatt Emerson had seen that truth when no one else could, and together they had built a life that proved it beyond all doubt.